Egypt has been the leading provider of humanitarian aid to Gaza, contributing approximately 80% of the total assistance. With this in mind, could you elaborate on the reasons behind Egypt's substantial commitment to supporting humanitarian relief efforts in Gaza?
Thank you so much for having me on Qnews. Certainly, Egypt, since the beginning of the crisis, a few hours or days away from October 7th, 2023, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi highlighted the necessity of a truce, and they started a new political phase to de-escalate the situation, which resulted in the first ceasefire agreement, and the humanitarian aid access started. What happened today regarding the immediate flow of around more than 100 trucks from the Rafah to the Karm Abu Salem crossing, where they entered through the occupying forces in Palestine, indicates the readiness and the preparedness of Egypt, as we stand fully prepared, and the Rafah crossing is open from the Egyptian side, and the closure comes only from the Israeli side. And therefore, what happened today and this morning, and what we are seeing on the television, and it is also reported by the international media agencies, of the volume of aid trucks being entered into Gaza when the occupying forces allowed the air trucks to actually enter, is an indicator that Egypt stands fully prepared to help the Palestinian brothers on the other side. Also, the numbers may indicate that more than one third or 80% of the humanitarian aid provided to the Palestinian population and our people in the Gaza Strip comes solely from Egypt. In addition, there has been a high level of preparedness in the Arish airport to receive humanitarian aid from the states willing to provide aid into Gaza. What we are seeing today indicates the Egyptian commitment and the intensive efforts exerted in the past few hours, as well as activating the third item around which the truce revolved. As we are aware, there has been three items: first, cease agreement; second, dividing the lands; and third is the entry of humanitarian relief. The Egyptian efforts resulted in the start of the humanitarian aid entry once the occupying forces allowed the aid trucks to enter through the Karm Abu Salem crossing after the meeting of the Israeli cabinet. And today the aid trucks started entering through the Karm Abu Salem border crossing to be distributed in the Gaza Strip, and to use once again the international organizations and the United Nations to distribute food, especially after the failure of the GHF backed by the US and the Israeli army.
Can the current humanitarian crisis in Gaza be largely attributed to the ineffective aid distribution systems managed by Israel and the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, as you just mentioned?
Definitely, this foundation failed miserably and caused a humanitarian catastrophe and a famine, as the occupying forces insisted on not providing sufficient amount of aid. Also, the sidelining the relief specialized foundations and organizations who have all the expertise to deal with the situation. The GHF was suspicious financially and management wise. The international pressures that took place and the um deteriorating support for Israel and embarrassing the United States and the countries that did not have any problem with establishing new relations with the occupying state. In addition, also to the diplomatic and political pressures exerted by Egypt and holding on to the idea of non displacement of Palestinians, all of which resulted in the decision made last night inside Israel to allow a tactical pause or suspension of the military operations to allow the unrestricted flow of aid.
So, how is Egypt utilizing its role as the United Nations conference to garner international backing for both a two-state solution and the humanitarian aid initiatives?
Egypt has never stopped, not for one day, since the breakout of the crisis to de-escalate the situation. This is in addition to the humanitarian rule adopted and the reconstruction plan. It has mobilized for an Islamic Arab meeting to ensure a coordinated plan in place, but it was failed by the occupying state. What is happening today is a completion of the Egyptian pioneering role in providing better circumstances and a better situation for the Palestinian population, especially in the Gaza Strip, also to complete the diplomatic path at an international level and in a binding manner so that the Israeli government can actually give in to the international pressures, and with its declining support and the campaigns for an economic embargo on Israel and not to provide them also with weapons to kill innocent unarmed civilians in Gaza. All of these efforts are the fruits of the Egyptian endeavors that started very early on. Egypt is building upon these moves in international gatherings, and this gathering in specific might actually lead to the activation of diplomacy to find a solution for the Palestinian question and to seek not only to a truce or a ceasefire, but to establish the historic right of Palestine to establish a state and for the two-state solution in a diplomatic path, in addition to the relief and humanitarian aid, humanitarian efforts provided to Gaza by Egypt.
So, what effects do you anticipate the temporary ceasefire and the safe passage routes declared by the Israeli military will have on Egypt's ongoing humanitarian aid operations?
Any cessation of hostilities, whether it's a tactical pause or suspension or whatever the occupying forces might call it, to allow a flow of humanitarian aid from the Egyptian gateway to help our brothers in Palestine is a positive thing. This is undeniable. Regardless of what has been announced by the Israeli government, it's not a ceasefire, it's a tactical pause. And the ongoing statements to eliminate Hamas or the Palestinian resistance by the Prime Minister, the Israeli plans, whether to divide Gaza or to occupy it militarily or to govern it, has never stopped. What changed here is the amount of the exerted pressure by the international community to provide an unrestricted flow of aid and to use once again the international organizations for distribution. What is happening treats half of the problem, but the main problem on the ground is the reconstruction, and then comes the diplomatic path to start moves to the post-war phase, and then the two-state solution that leads to a solution for the Palestinian question
Yes.